Nwanuforo from Asset Intelligence, and thank you for joining us for this market update. I'm joined today by Ritu Vohora, investment specialist at T. Rowe Price, an investment firm we work with closely. So Ritu, putting it all together, we're coming up to the end of the year. It's natural to start thinking about what 2025 has in store for us. What are the kind of key risks and opportunities you see, and not just for next year actually, but for the kind of a second half of the decade as well?
I'll get my crystal ball out. That's a difficult one to say, but I think, generally, when we look at the markets today, we're quite optimistic. But let's start with the risks first. I think the biggest risk for markets is going to be fiscal deficits. They're huge, not just in the US, but globally. And I think that's an issue for investors because it means governments have to issue a ton of bonds. That means probably longer term rates have to go higher from here. And that has implications. And one of our CIO also worries whether the US 10-year yield could get to 5%. And that has implications not just for bond markets, but of course equity markets, particularly where valuations are today. The second risk I'd say is around unanticipated inflation. I think where we know inflation may come through tariffs, markets can price that. But if it starts sort of coming up from other areas, I think that is a risk for markets. And finally, I think we need to be humble. There will be unknown risks. So again, we need to prepare our portfolios by having some defensiveness or ballast as we go through 25 and through the next decade. Now, coming to the opportunities, I think US exceptionalism will persist. So I think investing in some of that as US large cap growth, these long-term secular winners will continue to do very well. And again, when I think about some of the bigger themes, not only for the next year, but over the next decade, to your question, is I think we're in a golden era for radical innovation, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence and healthcare. So AI has been all the talk in 2024. We're probably past the first innings, but I think, when we think about where the opportunity is, it moves from things like semiconductors to software, cybersecurity, fintech, loads of different areas. But also when we think about the whole value chain from the need for energy consumption by AI, building of data centers, and also think about how you cool those centers. So there's lots of different opportunities within AI, not within technology alone, but across a whole host of different sectors. And there's also the confluence between AI and healthcare. So now what we're seeing is AI being used for cancer screening. So this is incredibly innovative technology. And we're also excited about healthcare. I think, we've seen GLP-1s, these are the radical drugs for not only diabetes, but for weight loss. And it's actually going to be one of the biggest innovations since penicillin, right? So this is huge. And you may have heard of things like computer hacking. We now have gene hacking. So we can now look at individual genes and use therapy. So there's lots of innovations within healthcare that I think over the next decade make us incredibly excited. And coming back to sort of 2025 opportunities more specifically, as I mentioned, I think, we're excited about a broadening in markets outside of tech and the US. Areas like value, particularly financials and energy, we think can do quite well. Small caps, we think is a great opportunity set for investors. And again, as I mentioned, inflation is a risk. So having some inflation protection, whether that's through value, inflation protected bonds, or areas like real assets, so commodities that can provide a really good hedge for investors as well.
Oh, well, that sounds like a very exciting future. I think it's quite nice to have that confluence of putting your money to work, but also having it do some good in terms of innovation and medical developments as well. We hope you've enjoyed watching. If you have got any questions about anything you've heard today, get in touch with the team at Asset Intelligence and we'll be happy to provide you with further information.